Hey guys, I'm a Masters ranked Kled player, currently the best in my region. I've been playing Kled since Season 6 when he released, and been playing top lane since I started playing League of Legends way back in Season 5. Welcome to my ultimate Kled guide, let's get into it. So what are the pros of Kled? The reason you're going to pick him over any other champ. He's really good in 2v1s, similar to a champion like Renekton or Darius for example. He's got really high damage, he's a lane bully. He supports aggressive playstyle and is very powerful with aggressive players. He's highly mobile offensively with his E ultimate and also having access to queuing over walls. He's very strong roaming due to his ultimate. He's insanely strong tower dives due to his ultimate shield as well as dismount dropping tower aggro. He's an extremely strong counter pick into the matchups he does counter. Very strong early game, and he has very powerful outplay potential. The drawbacks to playing Kled is that he's difficult to learn due to his passive and the complete character design 180 that comes with it. Kled goes from highly mobile and unkiteable to easily kited semi-range champ with the D-mount. However, he's also difficult to master due to having countless ways of using combos for which circumstances you're in, and his R being one of the biggest double-edged sword abilities in the game. Similar to a champ like Warwick or Olaf, Kled needs to be playing on the edge to get the most out of his champion design, which means he's quite a risky champ to pick up compared to most champion designs and is lacking in consistency, which is the main reason why not many people play him. There's also another layer of complexity to Kled, especially in top lane after 6. Most champions you'll be versing top lane have very powerful ultimates, for example Volibear, Renekton, etc. Whereas Kled obviously only has a roaming ultimate, so in most matchups top lane you have to play quite methodically when you're versing those type of champs. Kled also has quite a lot of counters in top lane especially, which makes him not a good blind pick at all. Another problem with Kled is he's a really feast or famine champion. You really do need to be playing aggressive and expanding your lead early game, otherwise you're going to drop off quite hard in the mid to late game. Kled is also lacking quite a bit in the AoE damage department. He's pretty much only got the little bit of damage from his E as AoE and also Tiamat. Additionally, Kled has practically no CC in his kit bar the little yank and slow of your Q and bump of your ult. Alright, so for Kled runes, you're always going to have precision as your main page. It's just more value than all these other things, obviously. You want the sustained damage, you're a fighter at the end of the day. Conqueror is going to be 99% of the time you're going to be taking Conqueror. However, Fleet Footwork and Press the Attack I think are the only other viable keystones for Kled. Fleet Footwork, obviously taking it is going to cut back on your damage a fair bit. But in those tough lanes like Vayne top, Cannon top, you can take this to just allow you to survive lane and hope your other lanes can pick up the slack. But most of the time you'll be running Conqueror. PTA you can take with lethality builds is when I like to take it. If the whole enemy team is squishy, and I'm going to run a lethality build for whatever reason. Kled mid also works quite well with it, because obviously you're versing squishy mages most of the time, squishy assassins. So it's a bit better than the sustained damage that you get from Conqueror. But for the most part, it's pretty much always Conqueror. And then these 3 runes is as follows. Absorb Life is not really that impactful compared to what Triumph is, especially with the extra gold you're getting helps you snowball off kills a bit better, even though it's only 20 gold, but every kill adds up. But it's scaling off missing health and max health is really good for Kled as well, since he has a high base HP pool, which means his early Triumph is going to be the most significant in top lane out of any champ before you back. And if you keep building health, obviously it will stay the best. Then it's always Alacrity. Since Tenacity got removed out of the game, I don't think the haste is very valuable in Kled. I used to run the Tenacity a fair bit, just to help when you're demounted, you don't get just stunned and just killed before you get a chance to do anything, as well as your engage obviously. But
Since that's been removed, it's pretty much always Alacrity. Gives you more damage overall. It helps you remount, helps you CS. Just overall good rune. Last Stand, just way better value than these other two. Cut Down, I have ran a little bit since it's been changed. It is actually able to be run on Kled since it's been changed. Since before it used to work off the health difference between you and the opponent, and obviously Kled has a lot of health, so it didn't do nothing. But Last Stand, obviously the percent increase is just higher, way higher than these other two, and you're going to be spending quite a bit of time on low HP since you have your remount mechanics, so it's just overall better. But there is some flexibility within the second rune page, so we'll get started on the ones I consider the best. Overall, I think the best scaling rune page would be Transcendence Gathering Storm. Run this in lanes that you think you'll have no problem winning early. You don't need the extra help from something like Resolve to win your lane. And say you think the game's gonna go late rather. Gathering Storm obviously just racks up infinite value as the game gets longer and longer, so that's just a great rune overall. Even if you're only getting to say 20 minutes, 14 AD is a pretty significant amount. It's like 400 gold or more, a bit more worth of stats for free out of your rune page. But 30 minutes is the ideal threshold. You're hitting nearly 30 AD for free. That's like over 1,000 gold worth of AD, which is pretty great. Transcendence obviously is just a bit of haste and gets some cooldowns back when you get a takedown after level 11, so it's pretty decent for 2v1s and whatnot. The other two runes I think that are pretty good in this page is Nullifying Orb and Nimbus Cloak. When you run these, you can run them with either Transcendence if you think the game's not going to go very well, not very long rather, or Gathering Storm. But obviously Nimbus Cloak you never want to run if you're running TP, only with like Ignite Flash, which I commonly prefer. But it's really good in matchups like Kayle, for example, that have like that slow and speed boost to try and run away from you, and you really need to shut her down early, so you need to be able to stay on her head. I like to run it into Kayle just to help a little bit with that, so that way you can ignite and get a speed boost, so you can hopefully make her have to waste flash, or if you both trade flashes, it's just a benefit for you because you get a speed boost and she doesn't. It's also good into things like Rumble that might be taking Nimbus Cloak themselves, so that way you can sort of counteract their Nimbus Cloak. Nullifying Orb a lot of people consider to be a really weak rune, and to be fair, I did originally before I started experimenting with it, but now I think it's actually surprisingly works really well into those AP matchups, or if the team has a lot of AP, for example they have 3 AP threats and whatnot, something like Cannon Top. It just causes, it's not just gonna save your life when you're definitely dead, but if there's a situation where they're cutting it close and they think they've calculated their damage perfectly, 100 shield could just throw them off so hard and just end up with them walking away thinking you're dead and then you just surviving, or you getting a remount off where they thought you'd die before you remounted. It can make all the difference, especially when you pair it with Hex Drinker and whatnot later on. You might be getting a 600 shield and then an extra 100 on top of it is pretty significant. So it's probably the least used in this page. If you just want to have a rune page you can run all the time, I would recommend just Transcendence Gathering Storm. It's pretty much good into all matchups. But for newer Kled players, and also if you're in some sort of tough lane or you think you're going to have to split push for whatever reason, I recommend running a Resolve page with Demolish Second Wind. I don't really like Bone Plating. I think its cooldown is just way too high. 55 seconds for a cooldown on a rune that could potentially do nothing, I just think is just a waste of a rune. Whereas Second Wind is always going to have value. Even against those melee champs, you do a short trade, it just means you, after that trade, you're just going to recover quite a bit of health. And also, it works off missing health as well, and because Kled's base HP is so high, obviously you're going to heal a bit more from Second Wind than most champions. Demolish as well helps you get the extra plating gold when you need it. And it works off max HP, so Kled's Demolish early game again is going to be better than most champs. All these other runes, I don't think there's any other ones that are even worth considering really in this page. So these are the two main pages that I recommend. I'll just go over why I don't take the Domination rather anymore. I see a lot of Kled players when I do see them always running Domination. I'm always just cringing to myself. Like, since Sudden Impact got changed so it does a burst of true damage rather than gives a bunch of lethality, it got put on a 10-second cooldown rather than 4, so it used to be infinite uptime, whereas now it's just an occasional burst of damage. So it doesn't do nearly as much damage as old Sudden Impact would have. And I used to run Ingenious Hunter, and obviously that's been removed out of the game completely, so can't run that anymore. I think the best rune in here is Eyeball Collection, so if you were to take this page, I'd probably just do something like this, Sudden Impact Eyeball Collection. Because Eyeball Collection gives you up to 18 AD once it's fully stacked, which obviously raw AD is pretty good on Kled. You can also get Treasure Hunter or Eyeball Collection Treasure Hunter, but I don't really think it's that great overall. I think there's better options. For example, Inspiration I think is also fairly viable. I think this is a lot more viable than Domination, but I think Sorcery and Resolve are your two main, like 50-50. I wouldn't say one's better than the other, it just depends on circumstance. But Inspiration I think is a bit worse than them, but still viable. I like to take Cashback and Cosmic Insight. Cashback obviously doesn't have any impact until you get your first legendary item, so about like 15 minutes into the game, depends on how well you're doing early really, but around that threshold, that's when you're going to be getting some extra money. If you've got like an extra 100 or so gold after your legendary item, then you'll be able to get an extra longsword. So if you have this, I like to not back when I'm just about to get enough money, but back when I've got like 100 extra gold, so that way I can pick up a longsword free right after as well. Obviously Cosmic Insight, you get your summoners back up faster. It's good with long cooldown summoners or short cooldowns. Obviously if you have Ignite, it's going to be up a lot more often, and you can just throw it out for no reason just to chunk people out and whatnot. But then again, if you have long cooldowns like TP, Flash, they're going to get a significant decrease in their timer. It also takes about a second off all your Tiamat procs. Not quite a second, but close enough. So yeah, that's alright. But overall, I'd recommend these Sorcery and Resolve Tree. Now these two runes down here I'd take every single game, Adaptive Force and Base HP, because you're early game champ, obviously you want the base HP rather than scaling, so you can get that snowball going easier. But this rune is preference, whether you prefer hitting a little bit harder or attacking a bit faster. I personally think like if you're doing a whole combo and you get an extra attack in because of attack speed, it's probably going to do more damage than getting like, I think it's 6 AD or 5 AD on every single auto attack. Whereas you might be doing an extra auto attack again that's going to do like 55 damage. So I don't feel like Adaptive Force is really going to make up for it. And also it helps you remount quite a bit, it helps you CS a bit better. So overall I just prefer it, but this is preference. If you want to take Adaptive Forces, there's no issue with that. But yeah, this is like what a standard page would look like, or this for example. I do recommend this page for people starting out with Kled. It's better for laning as well, since this doesn't really do anything for you until at least level 8 and 10 minutes for Gathering Storm. So in early game matchups, something like Renekton, where you're pretty much gonna fight at level 3 and whoever wins the lane. So I like to take this just to help you with that early game power, so hopefully you can win that level 3 all in sort of thing and win the game off it. But yeah, that's pretty much the rundown for Kled runes. Alright, so I just wanted to go over my personal tier list for Kled matchups. We'll start with the easy ones. I think Rumble is probably one of his best matchups. Um, Rumble is just very squishy and kind of relies on him having more move speed than you with his W to kite you out. But Kled is like really mobile, and you can just jump on him, and he's low base armor, and you're really strong early. He just seems to not do very well into Kled at all. Similarly, Trindam is sort of the same. You just have a lot of damage and you burst him out. You can shut him down early very easily. With his ultimate, obviously you have your remount mechanic, which you could potentially just remount and he can't kill you in his ult. As well as you have a lot of options to run away from him with mobility, R to cancel his E, and Q yank also cancels it. Cho'Gath, even though he does have his ultimate that's somewhat, well, not necessarily an execute, but it works like an execute, you kind of just stomp him early, and later, if he does become a problem, you can build Bork into him, which just nullifies his entire existence. And normally you can usually kill him before you even dismount and before you even get ulted, so it's fairly easy. Wukong is sort of pretty squishy. You don't really see him top that much often anymore. His W doesn't work on you because you get true sight off your E and your Q, assuming you hit it first. So if he tries to sneak around with his W after you're in the middle of a combo, it just doesn't work. You're just going to hit him anyway, and you just generally kind of out DPS him. He is very strong level 1 though, so you have to look out for that, but most of the time you can beat him level 1 as well. Briar just sort of stands still if they do play her top. It's very easy to avoid her E. She sort of just stands still and you just whack her and win. I don't know what else to say. You just kind of beat her. It's a pretty brain dead matchup. Akali pretty squishy. Again, she has invis in her W, but you have true sight in your E and your Q. You can cancel her E engage and her ultimates with your ultimate if you need to. So yeah, pretty easy matchup there. The last two are just the big beefy tanks of top lane. Mundo's passive kind of works against him with Kled because Kled Q yank doesn't really do much in the terms of CC, but it procs his passive and makes him pay a pretty decent chunk of current health to proc it. And then afterwards he's slowed, so you can usually step on his little canister, and it's just essentially makes your Q do a lot more damage, and he just kind of gets rolled. You also have Grievous built in with your Q, so you don't really need to worry about that too much. Sion kind of similar. You can practically never get hit by his Q. Yeah, he's just all around pretty easy to kill. But the thing is, the problem with Sion is a lot of the time when you kill him, if you dismount just before you kill him, a lot of the time you'll die to his passive because you're so slow running away, and his passive will just mop you most of the time before you can remount. But you can actually gain courage off attacking him in zombie form. I should also mention that about Wukong as well. The clone that Wukong summons, you can actually hit with Q and auto attacks to gain courage, which is pretty niche, but it can save your life often. Overall, the tanks don't really do very well into Kled since they don't really have much damage to kill him once he demounts. It's really easy to sort of remount before they can kill you. Anyways, on to easy matchups. I do have this in order of what's the most difficult to verse. So whatever's on the end on the right hand side will be the easiest to verse, whatever's on the far left will be the hardest. So Aatrox. Aatrox is fairly favoured towards Kled. I think Aatrox overall is pretty strong, and good Aatrox players make the matchup more of a 50-50. But generally you should be able to beat Aatrox pretty easily. While you're mounted, at least, it's very hard for him to hit a Q. When you're demounted, it's really easy for him to kite you, so you have to watch out for that. But while you're mounted, you do kind of slap him around. So yeah, overall it's just fairly easy. I'd always take Ignite into him as well in case you do miss your Q and you need the Grievous early. Yone Yas sort of similar. I'd say Yas is probably a bit harder now since he's a bit more tanky compared to Yone. And since the removal of lethal tempo, these matchups got a lot easier, which I am thankful for because I did not like them. But yeah, generally they're just a bit squishy. Yas can win wall your Q, so kind of look out for that. Maybe don't always EQ if he's always win walling it. Just E first and use a Q later on. But yeah, just try not to do hella long trades with Yasione, because usually their Q will be a lot shorter cooldown than yours. But early game you can clobber both of them. It's only they do outscale you eventually. Especially if Yone builds Bork, or Yas even builds Bork, it's a bit of a problem. But usually you should have a few kills by then. GP is fairly easy. Really good GPs will make it pretty difficult, but generally it's kind of easy. You just dash on him, just do your thing, I guess. Not too hard. You can often kill his barrels very easily if your W's up, especially since you have so much attack speed. Try not to use your last auto attack of your W on the barrels though. Try and use like your second or third to kill it, because obviously you want to save that last auto attack for hitting the GP himself. Mordecai's are pretty favored, pretty big target, pretty easy to hit. It's fairly easy to dodge his Q. You can rush more into him if you're struggling, you're going even, whatever. More practically guarantees that you remount in his ultimate when he ults you, even if you do get hit by Qs. But more often than not you can dodge his Q or flash it, and usually if you dodge a couple Qs and you remount, you should just beat him. But yeah, it's a bit challenging to dodge the Qs when you're not on Skull, but when you're off, when you are on Skull, it's fairly easy with your E. Just use your E and your E2 to dodge when he casts his Qs. Olaf, you kind of just beat him in general unless he cheeses you level 1, which often happens. So don't fight him. You can beat him level 1, but you have to kite him out. Don't try and like stand there and just attack him. You want to be kiting back with auto attacks with your Q, kiting back. Make sure you get the remount. Otherwise you'll pretty much always lose. You need to dodge maybe 1 or 2 Qs as well. Urgot, big hitbox. You can kind of clobber him early. He doesn't really have much of a chance. Use your E to dodge his E if you can. If not, you can cancel his E with your ultimate. Also, he does a lot of percent max health damage later into the game, so later on he does outscale you quite hard, but he should be fairly fed and be able to just mop his team by then. Ornn is a fairly easy matchup. I think Ornn's pretty strong at the moment, so it's not as easy as it normally is, but you can cancel his E and his second cast of his ultimate with your Q and your ultimate, both stopping the knock-up and actually stopping the dash, which is pretty useful. If he tries to E away from you while you've engaged on him, you can just tap R and quickly cancel it. But yeah, overall he has to be really careful when he uses his E, because your Q could just yank it because he's clicked it at a bad time. So yeah, overall fairly easy matchup. Darius, I know a lot of lower elo players struggle with this matchup, just not specifically on Kled, but just in general. You never want to fight him in an all-in, because he gets 5 stacks and he just gets massive amounts of AD. The ideal scenario is to trade with him, keep Skull and not demount, and get out with a little bit of health. If he's half HP and you're half HP, that's a good trade for you, because that means you can usually kill him before he can kill you. But if he's both full HP, chances are you're not winning that. My biggest tip is never to dash into him unless you're on your side of the river. Always save your E, and if he walks up to you, just hit Q and whack him with W's and then dash away. But be careful he doesn't cancel your dash with his E, because that's something he can do. If you're really worried you're going to die, you can R him and then instantly E away, and most of the time they won't be able to hit you with the E in time. But yeah, also your R and your E are really good for getting inside the radius of his Q. I'd never try and walk inside his Q, because for some reason I just seem to always get hit by it, even if I'm standing on top of his head. So I like to make sure I always have R to dash me onto his head, or E2 at the time where his Q is going to hit. Yorick, early game, you just completely clobber him. He has a very weak early game, and you've got a very strong early game. It becomes a bit challenging after level 6 if you haven't got a kill. If you've got a kill, normally you can just keep diving on him and killing him. Make sure you save your E2 proc to escape his W. But yeah, you want to try and kill his maiden if you're equal, because you probably won't be able to just dive on him and kill him after 6. But if you are fed, you can just continue to just jump on him all game pretty much. Now we get to matchups I consider to be more skill matchups. So first is Jace. Most Jace players you'd be able to clobber, especially lower elo. But when you start getting higher elo, like Masters Plus, I think even Diamond Jaces you'd be able to just obliterate. When they start to get pretty decent at the champion, like those Jace 1 tricks, it becomes a bit challenging when they have a lot better spacing and they're really good at using their hammer form E. But generally you just dash on him and save your E2 for when he knocks you back with hammer form. Because if he knocks you back with hammer form and you mash E, as soon as the CC ends, you can dash back onto him, and a lot of the time your tether won't actually break. And if in that scenario where your tether doesn't break, you win pretty much every time. Gragas is just a nullifying champ. I just don't like that matchup whatsoever. You just sit in lane, you don't do anything, you can't engage with E. Unless he's just like really bad, you just sit there and farm, there's nothing you can do. I often take Fleet into him, or go Ravenous first item. But yeah, it's just hella boring. No one really wins though. You shouldn't be dying to him unless you've stuffed up. Singed will outcompete you late game, and especially in 5v5, so you want to be split pushing when you verse Singed to force him to answer you. But early game there is room to kill him, even though it's a bit annoying. You can use your demounted Q to cancel his E flip, which is pretty important. You can also do it with ultimate. But yeah, besides that, just make sure you hit your E if you're going to engage on him, because otherwise you'll just be left in the dirt, getting gassed to death. KO is sort of similar. She becomes quite a raid boss late game, outscales you very hard, so you need to get that early advantage. The combination of her W and Q slow and her W speed boost makes her really hard to stay on, so I often like to build either Cycler Sword or Stride Breaker into her, as well as sometimes Swifties. If she's running Swifties, I'll often pick them up in response, so that way she doesn't have a movement speed advantage. But yeah, she's fairly easy to dive, especially with your jungler, but solo as well, she's easy to dive, at least pre-6 anyway. Her ult has a very massive cooldown, so if she does use it, feel free to dive within the next like few minutes. But yeah, besides that, you just need to get the early advantage against her. Vladimir you only really kill if he stuffs up, and he does scale harder than you, so it's kind of an unfortunate matchup. But your Q does apply Grievous, obviously, and the tether will stay attached if he uses his W. So if you land an EQ on him and he doesn't W the initial latch of your Q, then he's sort of stuffed up, and you'll yank him. And often Vladimir players won't know the interaction. They'll wait till the last minute and then W when they're on like 10% health, and then your Q will just yank him. But if not, often the yank is enough CC for you to just stay on him with your W and kind of whip him to death. But yeah, you kind of have to wait for him to make a mistake and you land your abilities. Nasus, I feel like with the runes change, with the extra HP he can get from runes, is a bit annoying to try and deal with. Sometimes he's really hard to kill if they're playing right. But early game, he's sort of easy to kill if he stuffs up. He needs to stay like very far away from the minion wave. If you land like an EQ and then you whack him, you can often just destroy him. Your demount does cleanse his wither, so if he withers you when you've only got like 10% skull health left, that's ideal scenario. Because you'll demount and have full attack speed ready to remount instantly. But post 6 gets pretty challenging with his ult. Try and bait out his ultimate and run away with either your ultimate or your E. Malphite I feel like used to be a lot harder with the old runes of him double stacking armor, but nowadays he's very easy to beat early. He's very squishy before his first back, so if he ever walks up, just don't hesitate to dash on him. He's really easy for you to delete. Similar to Nasus with his E attack speed slow, it gets cleansed when you demount, so try and make him use it just before you demount so you spend as little time affected by it. Shen sort of similar. He blocks your auto attacks with his W, so you do have to be careful, especially when you're dismounted. He does have the potential to just dash on you and kill you before you can do anything about it with his W auto attack blocks, because blocking your auto attacks doesn't give you any courage. So if you see him dash towards you and you are dismounted, try and press Q. Just buffer it into him. At least you do some damage and get some courage rather than just being taunted and hitting nothing. You can again cancel his dashes with your Q and your ult, similar to Ornn. And that goes for any champ that's got a dash, so long as they're not unstoppable, like Gragas for example. Alright, Irelia, very easy to beat early. Just try and dodge her E's and obviously her tentacles. You should be able to dodge her tentacles pretty easily with your E, your E2 and the movement speed your E gives. But sort of like fight her how you would every other champ, except not auto attack as much and move around so you can dodge the tentacles when they're coming at you. You should be able to get a kill pre-6, especially versus lower ranking Irelia players, but after 6 it's a bit of a challenge. You have to try and bait out her ultimate and run away. Either that or somehow dodge all the tentacles in her ult and just kill her anyway, which is extremely difficult. My advice would be just to try and bait her ult and run away and then fight her later on. Alright, now we get to the overall counter picks. We'll start with Heimerdinger. I think Heimerdinger, obviously being a ranged top laner, since they buffed his Q turrets, I have been seeing a fair bit of Heimerdinger tops. They're usually one tricks, but it's absolutely miserable versing them. It takes like 3 auto attacks or something just to kill one turret. It's absolutely ridiculous, so don't even try. Basically you just sit there, take what scraps of farm you can get and hope your team does something, because they usually won't have a front line. Kennen, sort of similar situation. I often will try and build Stridebreaker or Cyclosword with Fleet Footwork. I recommend that for both these matchups and most range matchups. It's pretty miserable, to be honest. You shouldn't be able to kill him solo, but if you can, then obviously he's stuffed up somewhere, and you can get snowballing against any ranged top laner if you've managed to get a kill on them. But yeah, running more against these two is a good option as well. Nah, again, really hard to fight with his kite power. Against lower elo Nah players, it's a lot easier, but once they become one tricks and they know what they're doing, they're high elo, it becomes a bit of a challenge. Similarly with TF, just good old range top laners. No one's really a fan of them. There's not really much to say about them. You can parry the CC with your ultimate, especially TF. It's pretty obvious when he's going to launch his gold card. So you can just ult into him with that and potentially get kills off it, but they're usually running Flash Ghost, and it's kind of just aids to try and deal with them anyway. Quinn is a bit more manageable as a ranged champ. Similar to Jace, when she kicks you back, you can mash E and often not break the tether. And if that happens, you're on their head, you've yanked them with Q, 90% of the time you win. So Quinn is probably the one of the easier range top laners. She's not really a hard counter, but she's fairly difficult, especially if you don't really know what you're doing. Again, you can also R into her E to cancel the CC and put yourself on top of her head. Udyr has a lot of percent health damage, so early game you can kill him, but later on, after he's got a few points in his R and he's doing a lot of magic percent max health damage, he's also got a lot of physical percent max health damage in his Q. He just becomes an absolute nightmare. Kled really struggles into percent max health damage because he has such a high HP pool. It just completely shreds you, and he does hybrid damage, so it's really hard to build against. As well as having CC, which can shut you down pretty easily when you're demounted, especially in team fights. So overall, he's just a bit of a challenge to deal with. Pantheon kind of similar. His trading pattern is just do a lot of damage and then back off and you can't do anything, or poke, which both those aren't really ideal for Kled. He can also, similar to Renekton, which we'll get to, he can also kind of one-shot you as soon as you're dismounted with a combo. So it's really hard to stay in lane after you've dismounted, even if he hasn't done any damage to you yet. Cassante, you can beat before 6, but generally I find if you don't get at least a kill before 6, he kind of just clobbers you. Again, he does percent max health damage with his passive, and it becomes true damage in his ult. So he kind of just obliterates you. You can't really build much health into him. Yeah, it's just a challenging matchup in general. Lots of CC to shut you down in your demounted form as well. Garen, sort of similar. His ultimate just is an absolute nuke. So once he hits level 11, it's kind of impossible. At level 6, he doesn't quite one-shot you as soon as you dismount, but at level 11, it's practically full HP. You dismount, you insta-die. So it becomes really challenging. You need to get a kill before 6 in this matchup, which is fairly weak early game. So you can beat him early game, but after 6 and definitely after 11, he's just impossible. And he scales quite a bit harder than you as well. Akshan, another ranged top laner. I don't really find this one too difficult, just because his only escape, his swing, can be body blocked. So if you dash onto him, usually your E, if you're hitting it, is going to be behind him, and then if he tries to swing away, he's just going to bonk straight into you, which often happens. But if he tries to kite first and then swing, you always have your E2 to dash behind him again and block it, as well as your ult can just bump him out of it. And once he doesn't have that escape, you kind of just usually win. But he can run balk, which is kind of a nightmare for Kled. But yeah, Zac I find pretty horrid because he's just so tanky and he does a lot of percent max health magic damage, and Kled's MR is quite low. So, and he just has a lot of CC. He can just one-shot you when you're demounted just by Eing on you, Q and an R, and like you can't move the whole time and you're just getting one-shot. Sort of similar with Set. Set kind of just stat checks you as soon as he gets balk, just stands still and whacks. He uses your HP against you with his ultimate as well. Does a lot of percent max health damage with balk and his Q. So it's just a bit challenging overall. Just try and dodge his W true damage if you can. You can also, if you manage to time it right, which is pretty rare, but use your R into his R, which causes him to just fly off because you're unstoppable, which is very niche, and usually they'll only R you once you dismounted, but yeah, it is something you can do. Volibear you can kind of stomp early, but the problem with the champ is after he gets like Rod of Ages, and I think he's building Flicker Blade's second item, he just ends up being so much haste, and like the only way to deal with him is to kite him out, and obviously you're melee champ, you can't really kite him out. But before he gets items, it's a lot more manageable. After 6, it's kind of very difficult because his ult is such an absolute powerhouse, and obviously you don't have an ultimate to fight him 1v1 with. Well, you do, but it's not nearly as powerful as what his is. So yeah, it just becomes very challenging after level 6. As well as he can dive you very easily with his ult disabling towers. Warwick, one of the strongest top laners, even though you don't see it very often. He can just infinitely heal off the wave. Your Q Grievous is not enough, so you want to be getting like a Bramble Vest or something into him. Your Q Grievous is just never going to be enough for the amount of healing he has, and obviously if you miss it, you're completely doomed. Your Q Yank can actually cancel his ult while you're being ulted. That also works with Malzahar as well, not that you're going to be versing Malzahar top, but so if you're about to demount and you manage to land a Q, often Warwick players will try and ult you while you're demounted to finish you off. So at least if you land the Q before you demount, you have like a good second or so where he can't ult you, because otherwise his ult will be cancelled. So just look to do that. He does a lot of percent max health damage, a lot of magic damage again, a lot of CC, so in general you can't really fight him. It's not really a good idea to fight him. If you've given a kill or so, there's just no chance you're beating him. On equal footing, you do have enough burst to kill him when he gets low to be able to heal, but they'll often take barrier, which is just horrid. I like to always take ignite into him again, just for the extra grievous early game. Skarner, let's pretend this is new Skarner. New Skarner is a bit horrid. Like, you can't walk past the river, you just get CC'd straight into the tower. Your demount does cleanse his ultimate, but usually he'll ult you after the demount anyway. He just does a lot of percent max health physical damage, percent max health magic damage. It's just not really competable when you're doing like no damage, because he's just stacking armor. Tahm Kench sort of similar. You can beat him early quite well. It's fairly easy to dodge his Qs, but the thing is his ult kind of shuts you down pretty hard. If he manages to ult you after you demount, it's pretty much game over for you. He's just gonna spit you out, do like half your health if not more, instantly land the Q, and you're just kind of doomed, and most of the time you're going to be in the tower anyway. But there is room to beat him early, but his 1v1 is very strong. You'd want to try and team fight if you've got Tahm. He's considerably weak in a team fight. Riven, a lot of Riven players seem to think that Kled sort of dumpsters her, but I personally think it's the other way around. If you land everything, you can sort of rail her, but the thing is, it's really hard to land everything with her having so many dashes and shields and whatnot. She has a WCC and Q knockup, which sort of slap you in the face, especially if she lands both of them when you're demounted. Obviously her ult is a massive execute as well, which makes it really challenging to remount after level 6. I feel like if you don't get a lead before 6, you kind of lose. It's kind of doomed. Even if you're like 1-0 when you hit 6, there's a chance she'll just clobber you in a fight anyway because of her ultimate. So I try and be 2-0 by the time she hits 6. I think if you're at that threshold, usually you won't lose. What do you call it? Serpent's Fang, that's the one. Serpent's Fang's really good into her. I like to build that quite often, even sometimes first item. Renekton, sort of similar to Riven, but the thing is, he can dash in on you, do his combo, dash away, and normally, most of the time, you can't really do anything about it. But how to beat him is you want to continue the trade, especially if it's pre-6. Pre-6, you don't want to let him dash in on you, do a combo and dash away. You want to sort of EQ after him and continue the trade, especially if you're close to demounting. Because if he fights back and demounts you without his W and without his E and without his ultimate to sort of finish you off, you guarantee a remount and you beat him 90% of the time. But if you let him do these short trades, and if you're demounted, even if you're full Kled health, demounted versus him at practically any health is basically a death sentence. He's just going to dash on you, do his full combo, and you're just going to die before you even get a chance to do anything. So you don't really want to let that happen. The only time you want to fight him when you're demounted is if he's already used his WE, ultimate, and whatnot. Poppy is a tank. There is some room to beat her, but only if she stuffs up with her W mainly, because she can just block your engage of your E and basically just nullify any fight. She does a lot of percent max health damage, 18% in 1 Q, plus base damage, so even as a tank, she kind of shreds your life with percent max health damage, which is kind of annoying. But yeah, now we move on to some of the unplayable matchups. Fiora and Camille are like probably the most common that you're gonna see, especially when you start getting to like high Emerald, Diamond, Masters. But Fiora is a hard counter, however I'd say it's pretty easy to win the game, probably the easiest to win out of any of them early game. You have a lot of room to outplay, and I'd say anything below a Masters Fiora player, even some Masters Fiora players, just they can't play the champ well enough for you to actually lose to them. You can always use E, always try and use E to step her W riposte when you latch your Q, because that's the most common time that she's gonna try and riposte. So you can use your E1 or your E2 to step it. I usually try and E the Fiora, not just E out of the way. I E behind her, and if I think she's gonna W backwards, I E again straight away. But a lot of time just simply dashing through them will, when your tether's about to proc, will be plenty enough to negate it. But once, it's kind of just mind games, I suppose. But what you can do against her is when your Q is like just before you think they're going to riposte your Q when it's tethered, you can just ult out of nowhere, like make it look like you're not gonna commit to the fight, and then just ult them. You have to be relatively close, so she can't just react and W your ult. But I find doing this when they're say half HP in a combo, I can just tap R, and then the little knockback will stuff up when they're actually trying to click the W, and then it'll just throw them off. They'll end up getting yanked by the Q and not even press W. And a lot of the time I've just killed Fiora players from like half health instantly without them even clicking W. So yeah, I personally wouldn't ban this one, although late game she just presses ult and you just die to like 2 auto attacks. There's absolutely nothing you can do. It's completely miserable. But yeah, I wouldn't ban this one out of all the other ones, but we'll get to it. Gwen, again, similar to Fiora, before 6 you can just delete her. She's actually fairly easy pre-6. Just try to use your E to dodge her true damage of her Q. But after 6, her ultimate just completely shreds you. If you can dodge it, you can still win, but often you'll get hit by some portion of it, and she just starts doing a lot of percent max health magic damage, and it just becomes a nightmare. So I usually try and have like a fair lead before then. Trundle is... you can beat him before 6 again. But after 6, his ult is just a complete raid boss. You just can't do anything. Like you need to try and bait his ult and leave, but most of the time he's going to kill you when he ults, so just call your jungle and hope for the best. I usually do, but you kind of have to split push against him, otherwise he'll just take your whole base, so it is what it is. It's just miserable. But alright, so these ones I'd consider fairly unplayable at all stages of the game. Camille just out trades you with her passive. It's just very broken for short trades. If she does do longer trades early, you can win them, so try to extend the trade. You can cancel her E stun by pressing ultimate. You can also cancel her E dash away by pressing ult, but make sure you catch her while she is pulling herself with her E. If you are her before her E has actually grabbed the wall, it'll just pull her out of your CC anyway. Your Q, similar to a champ like Ornn, can also do the same thing with her E. But after 6, it becomes a nightmare to try and remount, because she can just dodge all your Qs with her ultimate. She can stun you. She just does a lot of true damage, can just nuke you instantly, so it's a bit of a nightmare. Jax after level 3, it's pretty doomed. You do have some room to beat him level 1, but his E is just a nightmare for you. But I have started building a Jax specific build, which I go Hollow Radiance with Steel Caps, and I find that works really well, having the mixed resists to tank him, and you're not really going to beat him anyway, so I kind of just go tank and do 5v5s and hope for the best. But that build, often I win against the Jaxes, and a lot of the time I can actually solo kill them early game, like level 6 to level 11 roughly. Just from building tank, it seems to work very well. I usually get a Sterix second item just so I can get some damage while also sticking with the tank theme. Teemo, you can kill early. You can kill level 1, but after he gets his blind, it becomes a nightmare. If he just blinds your W every time, he blinds you after you dismount, you just never remount. It's just a complete nightmare. Unless he stuffs up, there's not really much you can do. However, if a jungle gank does come, it's very easy for you to engage on him. It's very easy for you to kill him if he blinds someone else, or your team kill him if he blinds you. Irelia, you can win, and then she gets Bork and she's full build and you just lose. But lower elo Irelias are often not as skilled. It's easier to deal with them, but once you get to masters, they're just dashing everywhere. They're giving me a headache just looking at them. And it's just a nightmare. You can cancel her Q with ult, which I believe puts it on cooldown as well, even if you do have a mark on you. If you use it at the right time, and she doesn't, and the game doesn't register as she hit you, it puts it on cooldown, which is pretty good if she's trying to dash away to minions and maybe you've got a jungle gank or something you want to follow up. But your Q also does that as well, but that's kind of her bad. If she gets hit by that, you can't really predict it. But yeah, for recommended bans, I'd recommend either just sticking with Camille and Jax. I find Jax used to be my permaban, but since this new build, I've discovered I've just been banning I've been banning a lot of Volibear lately, because I just personally don't really like versing it at all. I find it kind of cringe, this build path, and it's just annoying to play against. But the most ideal ban, I'd say, is probably Camille. Unless you're lower elos and you're not really struggling with it, they don't seem that good, then ban whatever, I suppose. But I'd recommend banning Camille, Jax or Fiora mainly. Or Teemo if they're playing it a lot. I don't really see it a lot, but obviously if you're lower elo, Teemo's quite often picked quite a bit. So yeah, banning it could be a good idea. So with Kled items, obviously you're starting. We don't do longsword anymore since the Doran's change buffs, so 99% of the time it's going to be Doran's Blade Health Pot. But you can go Doran's Shield into things like Bane top, Cannon top. If I think I can solo kill him early, I'll often just go Doran's Blade anyway, because the 1080 is just really valuable for early fights. So 90% of the time it's Doran's Blade, but into things like Bane where I have no chance of killing her, I'll take Doran's Shield. There's quite a variety of boot options since Symbiotic Souls come out, but these are the only 4 that I'd recommend. Boots of Swiftness, I don't take that often. It's mainly into range top lanes that I need to be able to stay on. Nasus to stop his W Wither, massive slow. And also if the enemy team has an Ashe, because obviously you're going to be perma-slowed in every fight, it helps like you not be completely useless when it happens. Symbiotic Souls are really good for split pushing, because if you notice like 3 or 4 dudes coming for you, you can easily just like back off the wave, back out of vision, and just recall instantly, and not have to worry about trying to run out or them catching you while you're recalling, because it's only 4 seconds. As well as obviously roaming around the map. So I like to go these if I'm planning on split pushing a lot, or I'm going a lethality build where I'm going to run around the map. But most of the time with my bruiser builds, I go with these 2 boots. Most of the time it's going to be steel caps, obviously, because you're versing AD in your lane. Chances are you're going to be fighting him a lot, AD a lot, and the enemy ADC usually. But if there's a lot of AP or there's a lot of CC, I'll opt for Merc Treads. So now when it comes to Kled build, I don't really think there's one build, like cookie cutter build, where you can just build the same thing every game, no issues. But the closest to it would probably be Eclipse Rush. I feel like Eclipse overall is just a very good item for Kled, probably one of his best items. It's just very nice stats for what you want. The passive helps when you're remounting, getting shields, stop them killing you, and obviously the damage is always nice. So if you're new to Kled and you want to just stick to one build to get a feel for the champ, I'd say run Eclipse first. But all these items here I'm going to go over, I consider to be Kled's best items. So Ravenous, Profane, Stridebreaker and Titanic are all your Tiamat options. I think in every single game you play you should have a Tiamat item on Kled, because there's so much diversity between these 4 items and they're all insanely good for Kled. As well as helping him wave clear, which he doesn't really have the greatest wave clear, so it's really valuable. Obviously Ravenous is a bit less damage than Profane, but you get the sustain of the lifesteal and the AoE lifesteal effect of its active. So it's more suited to a bruiser, skirmisher type build. Profane obviously is your lethality option, really good for when you're going for a lethality one-shot type build. Stridebreaker and Titanic obviously both giving health, they're better for your tankier builds. Stride I'll usually take into anything that's really mobile, top range, top laners, something that I need to stay on its head to deal damage, or I have been going it quite a lot recently because ADCs tend to have their ADC items, for example, that like all these attack speed items just give a lot of move speed nowadays. Like you have Runins and Rapid Fire and Navori and even like Static Shiv have a lot of move speed on it. So I'm finding it in this current meta quite hard to stay on ADCs, especially when they're building items like Phantom Dancer, for example, has 12% move speed on it. Like it's a massive amount of move speed for one item. So this just helps with that sticking power later into the game when I need to stay on the ADC. But Titanic is probably the only Tiamat item that I wouldn't recommend rushing. All these others, you'd be quite alright to rush it. I think if you're gonna rush any of them, Stridebreaker and Ravenous are probably the best rushes. I think Profane is pretty good as a rush as well, but it's probably better if you rush Eclipse first and then grab the Profane, because it scales so well with the bonus AD you have. But Titanic I don't think is very good as a first item at all. I think if you're gonna run it, you should get Eclipse first, then Titanic. It's just I don't really know, but it just feels lacking when it's bought as a first item. But when you have some extra AD behind it, like from an Eclipse, for example, it just feels so much better. But yeah, now you got your pen options that I think are the best. My favorite out of these three is Black Cleaver and Lord Doms. I think Lord Doms, obviously 40% pen is just massive. So if you really need pen and you're playing by yourself, I think, or you're fed, you're like the main carry of the team that game, Lord Doms is probably the way to go. But if you're planning on playing with your team, you're planning on being like a front line, and you might not be the most fed, Black Cleaver is really good because it helps out your ADCs and your junglers or whoever's AD on your team, because it shreds their armor for everyone. So your ADC can get Lord Doms and double stack with your Black Cleaver shred. Obviously Cerilda is pretty good when you're running lethality. However, if you're running a lethality build, you can still opt for Lord Doms. The only reason you'd get Cerilda is because it would be giving less pen, is because you want that extra haste and the lethality that the item has itself. The Bitter Cold passive is kind of just meh. You're not really going to get much use out of it. If they're below half health and you're on their head, they're probably just going to die anyway. Sterix I've been using quite a lot recently, because of how much damage the ADCs have, and like just how team fights are going. It seems like the front line's just getting exploded instantly most games. So I feel like Sterix is your only way to not get instantly imploded when you engage, because it gives that big shield. but you do need some health backing you before you buy it. So I at least try to have an Edge of Night or like a Black Cleaver before I buy it. Obviously, if you buy it just by itself, it's gonna have a base shield that's not very big. I think it's 400, 372, 300. I don't know, something around that. Anyways, but if you bought it with an Edge of Night, for example, you get quite a decent jump of shielding. Even the 250 health, still 80% of that into your shield, which is not bad. So I think that's the bare minimum of having an Edge of Night. So if you're gonna go a lethality build, I like to pick up an Edge of Night and then get my Sterics after it, so I can still be somewhat tanky with my lethality build. But yeah, so these are some items that I think are pretty good but situational, whereas these items I feel like you'd be picking up some of these every single game. You're always going to have a Tiamat item. You should always have Eclipse in your build by at least third item, otherwise I don't reckon it's a good build. Eclipse is just that valuable. And then obviously your pen items and a bit of survivability, but these are situational items that we'll get into. Cyclosword is a lethality option for sticking power. It's similar to Stride Breaker, but obviously lethality. I like to run this when I run Fleet Footwork, because the energized passive pairs pretty well with it. The galvanized passive also works on Fleet Footwork, I believe, so you get faster fleet procs. Also, it just times very well, so when you dash in, you proc your fleet, you proc the Cyclosword at the same time, so you get sped up while you're slowing them down. Works really well into like range top laners when you want to go lethality build that game. If not, then I'll just get a Stride Breaker, but it is there as an option. Hull Breaker overall is a fairly decent item on Kled. The passive that happens every 5th auto attack, you can stack on minions, and then when you engage on the opponent with your W, your first auto attack will apply it, and then you do your whole W, and 2 auto attacks after your W, the second auto attack will apply it again. So you can get 2 procs of this pretty fast in an all-in. It does a fair bit of damage, but obviously that's your split push option. IE is pretty good as well. Obviously, if you're running 3 items, you want 50% crit if you're going to get IE. So an example build, maybe you go like Ravenous Lord Dom's IE or something similar. Profane Lord Dom's IE. But obviously it makes you really squishy. However, you can just completely one-shot people if you get a couple crits in your combo. Like by 3rd item, your last W auto attack, if it crits, is doing well over 1,000 damage. So it can be a heavy hitter. More to remind us, since the Lord Dom changes is just slightly outclassed by Lord Doms. The only benefit obviously is that it gets Grievous, which Kled does have inbuilt Grievous on his Q, so it's not too valuable. But that being said, your Q, obviously you can miss it and not get Grievous. It doesn't apply Grievous straight away, only after the yank, so they could dodge the Grievous, or something like an Aatrox could hit an auto attack and heal half his health before you've even applied it. So if you do need heavy Grievous for whatever reason, that's always there as your option, your Grievous option. Spear of Shojin, similar to Black Cleaver. You basically buy it where you would buy a Black Cleaver if for whatever reason you're buying Lord Doms or Cyrildas instead of Black Cleaver. Otherwise you just go with Cleaver. Like for example, if you wanted Profane Eclipse, you've gone like Profane Eclipse, Lord Doms, and you decided for whatever reason you want to start building Bruiser, you can go Spear of Shojin, Sterix for example, later on, just to get some HP behind you. Now these are your tank options. Jack Show is kind of like a late game tank option when you've decided you need to be the front line for whatever reason. You can build this like 4th, 5th item, 6th item. And yeah, it's just all around just pretty good hybrid resists, and it ramps all your resistances. Hollow Radiance, I have been building this into Jax's when I verse Jax. Since he is a pretty hard counter and he just blocks all your auto attacks, I find the burn damage actually makes the matchup a lot more playable, as well as the magic resist that helps deal with his ult, passive, and W. So I often will rush this item with plated steel caps early into Jax, and it just makes laning against him way less miserable. And a lot of the Jax plays that I've built this into have actually just outright won. I think it's very powerful into Jax, but that's the only time I really build it. Knight's Vow is kind of that armor option when you've got like a really fed ADC, and it's just a cheap option. So if you've already built a couple items, you don't have to invest a lot of gold into buying it. I also will get it like second item or even first item sometimes if I'm performing really poorly in lane for whatever reason. Maybe I've been ganked the whole pile and I'm just relying on my fed jungle or fed ADC. I'll often just grab this just to support them in any way I can, because obviously Kled doesn't have much CC to support him with. So Blood Mail I haven't done too much experimenting with. I imagine it could be pretty good. I just haven't really experimented with it that much, but it's obviously just quite a bit of AD you'd get out of it, and HP. There's not really anything else about it really. Opportunity is just your lethality option. No haste, but it's kind of like an in and out item. You dash in, you get a big burst of decaying move speed, you dash out. I've built it a fair bit. It's pretty cheap price point, 2,700 gold for the stats it gives, which is pretty nice. It's a good like second item option after something like Profane. You can go like Profane Opportunity Eclipse, or Eclipse Profane Opportunity, for example. I normally favor the Edge of Night though, just for the extra utility you get out of the shield passive. Ghostblade again is just your lethality filler item if you want to roam a bit out of combat move speed. It's good for that. I have tested both Opportunity and Ghostblade, and I tend to sort of lean towards Opportunity in general rather than Ghostblade. I just feel like it just gives a bit more lethality when you do go in, and that 5% move speed permanently is pretty useful, but I mean it's just preference really. Sundered Sky just makes you really tanky. I find it's really good to build when you're really fed and you need like a sustain item to stop people like just jumping on you and one-shotting you, taking your shutdown. So if you've gone, say, Ravenous Eclipse, you can pick up a Sundered Sky third item and skip Pen, because you don't really need a Pen item if you're like snowballing really hard. Usually you have enough damage to just kill people. Cainic Rooken obviously is your anti-mage item, other than Maw of Malmortius, which should actually be up here. Maw of Malmortius is a really good item. Maw of Malmortius is like your best option into AP as an MR item. I like to rush this actually first item into a lot of AP top laners, especially if I'm behind or even. If I'm ahead, usually I won't worry about it. I'll just pick up maybe a Null Magic Mantle and then just rush into whatever. But if you're even, especially against champs like Mordekaiser, it's really useful against. But yeah, that's your go-to MR item. But if you need more for whatever reason, you can pick up Cainic Rooken, or like you're not strong at all and you need the health for whatever reason, you can pick up Cainic Rooken as well. Immortal Shield Bow is a bit weaker since they removed the lifesteal off it, but obviously it's still got decent stats. Crit's not too bad on Kled, decent amount of AD. It is a little bit expensive for what you're getting, but it's a good lifeline shield passive if for whatever reason you don't want to build HP that game.
Hubris is another item that should actually be up there. I think the main purpose of buying Hubris is that you can rush lethality and rush a Dirk on your first back if you think you can win early really hard. However, I don't really rate it too highly because the inconsistency, if you're not actually getting a takedown with the item, it's just somewhat stat inefficient, and I'd rather just have the consistency of building another item that It's just better overall.
Now these 3 items I consider just garbage on Kled, and I would never build them. Def Stance, while it looks like it would be a really good item on Kled, which I really do like the stats of it, and I would be building it if it wasn't for the passives, really. The passive is what is the problem with Kled, the interaction with the Ignore Pain passive. So what happens is 30% of the damage is dealt to you over 3 seconds instead. But with Kled, if you have this item and you get killed, normally when you reach that threshold where you dismount, all that damage that you've taken to Skull's health is completely negated. But what Def Stance does is it still stacks up the damage you've taken and applies it to your dismounted health. For example, if I go here, you'll see I have stacks, and when I dismount, I'm still taking damage into Kled's health. So it just makes remounting harder, which is why I don't build it in general. However, if you are really fed and you can get that Defy passive heal off, and you're pretty certain of it, it can be run, but usually I don't run it just in case like I am fed, but then I end up like having trouble killing people later on for whatever reason. I just don't like to buy it. I think it's just too risky. However, I mean, you might like it, you might give it a try, but that's my personal opinion on it. Axiom Arc, I don't really see the purpose of buying this. I'd rather, like, yeah, it does give the haste, but I'd rather just pay the money to get extra damage. Like, for the same price, I could get an opportunity and pretty much like I'd be able to buy a whole nother longsword. That's only 50 gold more expensive. I get an extra 10 AD instead of the haste and the flux passive. But I don't really see the point, because when you are, like, say I are to someone, for example, by the time I get there, I go for a team fight, I'm like attacking everyone. Chances are I'm going to come out of that team fight, either the whole team's dead or I'm going to be dismounted running away. So like, even if my R was up again, I wouldn't be able to cast it anyway until I recall. So it's like, I don't really see the point. And it's not like Kled Ultimate has the biggest cooldown ever. Since Riot buffed it a while back, it's not got the biggest cooldown, so I don't really see the purpose in it. Same with Ionian boots. I would never pay the gold for 15 haste. I don't see haste as much value on Kled, even though he does have fairly long cooldowns, and at least early anyway. And obviously he's manaless, so you can just spam him as much as you want. When you go in for a fight, like you EQ, you're going to be using this combo, and then you're going to dismount, and then you're going to be like remounting and whatnot. Once you remount, your E and your Q are automatically back up anyway. So it's like, I don't see the point. Most of the time you won't be using your E and your Q multiple times before you demount anyway. Like, unless you're really fed and they can't kill you for whatever reason. So I don't understand. Like, I don't really get that. I see Kled players build it sometimes, and it's just, I don't know. Yeah, the ult haste, but again, the ult's not the longest cooldown anyway. So these 3 items I'd never run personally. I don't think those boots outweigh how effective these other boots can be. But yeah, let's get into some example builds. So we got this one I've been running a lot recently, which is the OG Black Cleaver Rush. It just gives you a nice mix of stats to get into bruiser building straight away. And also that further passive that gives you the move speed will double stack with Stride Breaker, the temper passive. So you get 40 move speed when you hit someone. It just allows so much more sticking power. Like I said before, I've been having a lot of trouble staying on ADCs and things that are building things like Phantom Dancer getting 12% move speed. They seem to be able to kite me really well, even though Kled has very high sticking power. So I've been really liking this build lately. And obviously the last few items are kind of situational, but like Black Cleaver and then your Tiamat item, regardless of whatever it is. I've been liking Stride Breaker lately. And then obviously you always want Eclipse. Eclipse is just a really good item in general. And then you've got similar bruiser builds running Ravenous, for example, like Eclipse into Ravenous. Black Cleaver, again, you can switch Black Cleaver with Lord Doms, but this is a more bruiser build, getting some tank stats, some HP. Similarly, lethality, if I don't really like to go a full 6 items of lethality, because I feel like once you have like 3 or 4, you can already one-shot someone. I just don't want to get one-shot myself, so I'll usually go like Profane Eclipse into your pen item, whether it be Lord Doms or Cyrilda's Grudge. I've tried both recently. I tend to sort of favor Lord Doms, but Cyrilda's Grudge is a pretty good option too if you prefer that. But yeah, after that I like to go Edge of Night because it starts my getting some tank stats. Obviously you get the shield, which makes you quite a bit harder to take down, especially for champs like Vayne that just it blocks their E and it doesn't block anything else. You can imagine if you are in on someone, you got a big HP shield, and then you've also got a spell block shield. They're just no chance. They're just dead. But that also gives you a bit of health, so then you can go Asterix Gauge last item and get like a 500, 600 health shield off it, which is fairly decent, especially for a lethality build when you've only got like 2000 health. Yeah, and then you've got Bruiser build with Titanic. As I said earlier, I like to go Eclipse and then Titanic. I feel like you should always get a second item if you're running Titanic. And then to capitalize off the fact that you're building health that game for whatever reason, I like to just keep stacking the health with Black Cleaver, Asterix and Jack Show at the end, so you just get more resists for the health you have. This is like a build where you need to be the front line for whatever reason, and they don't have much percent max health damage, so you can just stack it, no problem. And this last one here is into like AP top laners, where I like to run more first item a lot of the time. Obviously the Omnivamp you get when more procs combos pretty nicely with Ravenous, but you don't have to run Ravenous with it. Pretty much everywhere you see these builds, you can slot in another Titanic item, Tiamat item rather, in these positions. Like even with the lethality build, you could start it off going Ravenous Eclipse into these lethality items. No issue, like a Lord Dom's Edge of Night would have no problem. So they are kind of interchangeable, just depends on which matchup you're in. But then again, the Jack Show combos nicely with the magic resist you get from Moore and the armor you get from Steel Caps to amplify them more. But yeah, that's pretty much it for Kled builds, but I don't think anything's necessarily set in stone. My builds are hardly ever the same thing every game. They're always adapting to what the opponents are building, what champs I'm versing and whatnot. So you kind of need to get the feel for it, but I just wanted to show like overall some of the good items, the better items that you should be looking to build most of the time, and then other items that you can build. Alright, so now we're going to get into some applications of Kled combos and little tips and tricks. If you haven't seen a full list of Kled combos, I do have a video on my channel, and also it should be linked to this video somehow. Anyways, let's get into it.
While your first E can't go through walls, your second E recast definitely can. When you hit level 2 as Kled in lane, you should hold the skill point to see which ability you need first. If the opponent walks up and allows you an opportunity to use W, you should level it and use it to chunk them. Kled can use his ult for more than just roaming around the map. Here's a clip of me using it to parry a gold card so I don't cop the stun. Here's a perfect example of why you shouldn't just level your W. In this case, I use my W like an active ability to get a quick remount. You can also flash while remounting as Kled. In this clip I used it to avoid the damage, which allowed me to remount and not die. Similar to a champ like Aatrox, if you notice CC incoming, you should often fire your Q into it, so that way you can perform actions while you're CC'd. In this case, helping me survive and kill the One. Because of the delay in the knockback of your Q, you can use it to cancel CC abilities like Singed E and Blitzcrank Hook. This works very similar to Tristana or Ezreal. When dashing on a champ such as Xerath or Morgana, you can often predict the fact that they'll shoot their CC ability and cast R preemptively to cancel it. Kled has a very strong level 1, since when he demounts he gets access to an extra Q with a very short cooldown and 2 charges. It's also very hard for early game champs to kill him before he can remount with only 1 ability. If an opponent looks like they're about to flash over a wall, you can cast R preemptively just before you think they're going to flash to follow them. This also works with movement abilities like Tristana W or even Ezreal E. One of the main reasons Kled is such a strong tower dive champ is that when you demount, you drop tower aggro, and minions can also pick this up, so long as you don't damage the opponent afterwards. Kled has a small hitbox since he is a Yordle, so on red side dives I like to hug this wall to get out of tower quicker. Additionally, shooting your Q into the wall lowers the amount of end lag on the ability. This is another example of holding the W skill point. Sometimes it's better to hold it till you've dismounted so you can get a quick remount in lane. In this case at 1v1 that wouldn't be possible otherwise. Another useful piece of advice is to right click where you plan to ultimate and then double check your map to see where the auto pathing is pathing you. That way you never make a mistake with your ultimate and end up traveling a different direction than you planned. Thanks for watching my guide, I hope you learnt something. Good luck in your games and like and subscribe for more Kled content.
Sick of all the bad thoughts, people who are half-nots.
You are not as tough as